President Trump has now interviewed 7 possible candidates to replace retiring Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy. And so far, the president has spoken to 6 federal judges, 4 of whom were appointed by President George W. Bush, and 2 he appointed himself.
The White House says the president also spoke to Republican Senator Mike Lee. And did you know no sitting member of Congress has been appointed to the Supreme Court since President Truman appointed Harold Hitz Burton in 1945. President Trump told a crowd in West Virginia Tuesday night that he will make the right choice with his nominee next week.
I've spent the last 3 days interviewing and thinking about Supreme Court justice as such an important decision, and we're going to give you a great one. We're going to announce it on Monday, and I think you'll be very impressed. These are very talented people, brilliant people, and I think you're going to really love it, like Justice Gorsuch. We hit a home run there, and we're going to hit a home run here.
Caitlin Huey-Burns joins us now to discuss President Trump's decision. Caitlin is a CBSN political contributor and a national political reporter for RealClearPolitics. Caitlin, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, you heard the president there. He said his supporters will love his pick. So what does love look like for the president's supporters?
It's such a great question. Obviously, this president was driven by a very conservative evangelical base in 2016, many of whom are hoping that he picks a conservative justice who could potentially vote to overturn things like Roe v. Wade, which is obviously a hot button issue in this discussion. But as you know from covering the White House, and as we all know from watching this administration, it's very difficult to pinpoint exactly where the president is today versus where he will be on Monday. As you mentioned, Monday when he makes the pick, as you mentioned, he has been interviewing candidates. He's also been talking to Mike Lee, and that's important because Mike Lee is a member of the Judiciary Committee. So he's also been trying to figure out how to kind of tally up these votes.
Switching gears a little bit, EPA Chief Scott Pruitt is facing another week in the papers that you don't want to really be in the paper for. There's reports that he was making aids by hotel rooms and booking and then not paying them back. How is he still in that position with all this controversy swirling around him?
It's a great question, and there has been reporting that the president is seeing these headlines that come out nearly each week. It seems like there's something different.
A new layer.
And a new layer, exactly, and even more egregious than the previous one. There are a couple things to consider here, however. You know, Republicans are kind of walking a tightrope with a lot of them saying they like what he is doing as EPA secretary, but as the head of the EPA. But also these headlines are just becoming unbearable. But the other thing to consider is that the backdrop of having to confirm another person to replace him would be an uphill challenge, just given the narrow margin in the Senate and also what we're seeing with the Supreme Court fight right now. There's a very narrow margin to confirm anybody at this point.
And that's a great point and an argument that we often hear for why he hasn't fired his attorney general, because the confirmation hearing would just be so difficult. All right, speaking of difficult, Rudy Giuliani, the president's personal attorney, he set his own deadline that on July 4th they would have a decision about whether or not the president would cooperate with special counsel Robert Mueller and sit for an interview. Now, I spoke with Giuliani today, and he said there has been no decision. Is there any political reason for him to sort of push this off?
Well, Giuliani has set these deadlines. As you have said, he has been very talkative about it. He's been out there. You know, the president has continued to say that, you know, he's fine sitting down, but he's, you know, legal counsel is advising not to. I don't know that he'll face any political consequences at this point, just given that we've seen so many deadlines set by this administration pushed back or ignored altogether. We have seen, though, the president continues to tweet nearly daily about this investigation, and of course against the backdrop of the Senate committee coming out yesterday and confirming that Russia did in fact meddle in these in the 2016 election, confirming what the intelligence community has said. Of course, the president is meeting with Vladimir Putin next week in Helsinki, and you have, you know, various lawmakers trying to put pressure on him to say something.
Switching from the Senate to the House side, Republican Congressman Jim Jordan is denying allegations that he intentionally overlooked widespread sexual abuse while he was there at Ohio State. How much do we know about this? What are these allegations going to mean for him politically? And more importantly, since it's D.C., how are these allegations going to be used against him?
Right. I think that's a very important point. Jim Jordan is someone who has made his interest known and eventually running for Speaker of the House. He has made a name for himself on Capitol Hill as a very aggressive legislator in terms of really grilling members of past administrations, of the past administration, also taking a very hard line as it pertains to the overall Mueller investigation and the Mueller probe, going really hard after members of Department of Justice and so forth. And so this is a big story, and we're waiting to see what else develops from it. You have people coming forward, of course, in this case and talking about that they think that Jordan did know about these allegations that were surfacing at his time at Ohio State.
Interesting to see what will happen.
So yesterday, around 4 o'clock, right before a holiday, the Trump administration announced that they are reversing guidance on affirmative action. They're now telling colleges, look, you should take more of a race-neutral approach. Is there any political reason to do this right before you pick your Supreme Court nominee and in the months leading up to the midterms? Because we knew they were going to do this, but it's the timing that just seems very interesting.
It is very interesting, and especially against the backdrop, as you mentioned, of the Supreme Court fight and Anthony Kennedy, of course, leaving the court being that swing vote. You hear a lot of Democrats when they're trying to craft their argument against the eventual nominee for this position. Of course, they're talking about Roe v. Wade. Of course, they're talking about Obamacare, but also they're talking about things like voting rights. And these are all things that certainly animate the Democratic base. And we've seen that before, and I think we'll see that more so with this reversal. And I also think this is a president who really likes to reverse a lot of the things that the Obama administration did. He sees the Obama administration still as somewhat of an opponent. We've seen that on a variety of different issues.
It almost seems as if the president's foreshadowing what could be coming towards the court in the future, so the PR campaign can start about why he wants his guy or girl in there.
Right.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, all interesting stuff. Thank you very much, especially on the 4th of July.
Thank you. Happy 4th.